Yeah. So we'll be talking today about Holy Emperor Constantine, and uh, right. So, and it was mentioned also that Constantine is directly related to the events of the third century crisis, right? So, and you see here this relation, succession, and the relations, right? So, and Diocletian, it's very important, generally for all of us to know when our time is up, to know when to leave. And it's very often seen with with bishops, right? Sort of like, well, Metropolitan Vitaly was a great first hierarch, but sort of if he would have left in 2001, his memory would be much better. So Diocletian, in this sense, he retired happily, and you know that he was famous about being proud of his cabbage. He lived in his palace in modern day Croatia in the time of Split. Okay, so, and Galerius took after Diocletian. So, and Constantius, right, died in the year 300, and his son Constantine was a Caesar, was a Caesar of the West, right, and he started from England. There are still remnants of Constantine's time in England, right? And what was the frontier in England, right? Who were hostile neighbors with whom the Romans have to whom Romans have to contain in the British Isles? Who were those people?
The Picts.
Yeah, yeah, even more specific. Yeah, I meant Celtic people. Yeah,
the
but
Celts.
you go, the deeper level of expertise. Okay, so Galerius' palace still in Thessaloniki. That's where Constantine was kept a hostage for a while. There is still this monument from Galerius' time, from the early 4th century. Just think about this. Okay, so, and as a result of fighting with pretenders, right? Constantine came out as the king of the hill, right? I am assuming you are looking at screen share, so I'm not really repeating all this. Okay, so, and Constantine came out of as a victor. And think about that in 325, when the First Ecumenical Council happened, right? It happened in Nicaea because Constantinople was not consecrated as a holy city. And one of the reasons why, I mean, it's a selling point for you about Byzantine history right now, because one of the key readings that I subscribe to for regarding the ecumenical patriarchate, that they consider those few people who are descendants of the Romans, of the Byzantines, like the ecumenical patriarch and others there, maybe a few hundred, they consider themselves as custodians of that city that was consecrated by Constantine. Otherwise, why wouldn't they move to Sydney or Manhattan or elsewhere? So it would be much more, how to say, peaceful for them. But they want to stay there with this boat until it sank or something happened, because they believe they are the last Romans, last custodians who look after that city that was consecrated by Emperor Constantine. And that's again in another, that's why I said selling point, because it gives you idea how Byzantium is still with us. So Evgraf has this meme on his Facebook page, Byzantium is here. It's maybe too sentimental for my taste, but you see my point, right? So, Constantine in 330 consecrated Byzantium, which was a very good location, very prime location. And you can see that brief video in Popular regarding a foundation of Byzantium that we recorded when we were on a field trip there. And Constantine presided at the Ecumenical Council in Nicaea in 325 because Constantinople, his city, was not ready, right? So, and he came up with an interesting synthesis, and this synthesis that says a lot about processes in the empire, which were synthesis between uh, Greco-Roman culture and philosophy and Christianity. So, like, if what I mean by this, that Aristotelian philosophy became a very powerful tool for theology. Like, if you think about the whole term hypostasis, right? It won't be substance. It won't be found in scripture, because the idea was that all terminology of theology should be scriptorial. It's all should be taken from the scripture, but it's not always possible. It's not always possible. So therefore, Platonian idea or Neoplatonian idea that's associated with the philosopher Plotinus, they became very powerful. They became very powerful. So and Constantine, along the line of this synthesis, he presided at the church event because the first council happened in the year 49 Anno Domini in Jerusalem, right, in the book of Acts. And this became, since then until nowadays, this became a natural weapon of choice for the church, because it's conciliar event. Bishops, they get together, they clash ideas, they brainstorm, they discuss, and then they have also criteria, which is orthodoxy, to match those ideas against. So Constantine uses forum, but in his capacity as Pontific Maximus, because he presided at the First Ecumenical Council while he was not still a Christian, right? Coming up from his ideas that ex officio, because of his office as an emperor, he was in charge. Okay, does this make sense? Okay, so that's something, that this new fusion, right? New fusion between legacy, cultural legacy of the Greco-Roman Empire, and new phase, which was a sort of Semitic phase. If you think about time before the 4th century, there are Syrian Christians, there are still some Jewish communities, right? And now there is this powerful fusion, right? Goes on between the legacy, philosophical legacy, and and Christian faith and traditions, because there were already fathers like uh, Clement, like Saint Ignatius of Antioch, right? Saint Irenaeus of Lyon. There was already strong, the Christians already had strong theology, strong background. Speak up, Evgraf.
A question which I've heard over the years, many Protestants accuse uh, mostly the Catholic Church, but I suppose also to some extent the Orthodox Church, of changing based off the whims of Constantine. Like Constantine did some things to the church, Constantine changed things, Constantine. I'm just wondering how much power exactly did the church give him just because he was favorable to them?
Right. Actually, it kind of was an offer that you cannot decline. If you think about Eusebius, right? He's a contemporary. He was just how to say, overly enthusiastic about the conversion of the empire. Think about that. You were a minority, and then basically majority, and Christians, they work hard to prove their case. There is a whole idea of the writers, of whole type of writers who are known as apologists, who try to convince the Romans, listen, we are like you, we recognize your marriages according to your right, but we just cannot cannot sacrifice to the figure of emperor, and we cannot do a number of other things. But we are part of the larger social context. So now the empire converted, and a question for me, uh, if Christ's message, if the Beatitudes, they were for individuals or for the nations, right? My answer is, again, it's me, and it's up to discussion, that it was for individuals. No country, no even church can afford following the Beatitudes in, day out life, because they are totally based on self-renunciation. So with this in mind, there was an attempt to, when you start to make ideology out of the church, when you try to use church for the state purposes, there are problems. And those Protestants, they might have a point, but at the same time, we see those debates at the First Ecumenical Councils, confessors of the faith, people who would put all their money where their mouth was right away. They would not let anyone basically to distort what they believe was right. Okay, okay. So there were very strong uh, struggle in this sense. And Julian the apostate, he tried to unleash it, sort of releasing all prisoners of conscience, all heretics, all people who were persecuted before, that basically Christians would eat each other, would destroy each other through their constant polemics, through their ongoing debates. So therefore, there were debates at those councils. So constant Christians would not let anyone to take over what they believe was right, exactly because they believe it was the absolute truth. I cannot speak more. I'll leave it for Father John about this. It's not really my cup of tea right now. Okay, I teach imperial history. I don't teach ecclesiastical history. Yes, Ivan.
Well, this is ecclesiastically oriented, but
No,
like,
no.
so
Oh, okay, shoot it. But guys, keep it for Father John, because he makes a living out of this. Okay, Ivan, go ahead. What you have?
didn't they almost at the first ecumenical council kind of almost change their beliefs because they kind of needed to just keep unity? Like Eusebius of Caesarea, he proposed like a compromise, and it was almost accepted because they just wanted to finally like resolve unity.
Right. I
Almost
mean, I,
installed.
I'm a huge thing, right, of church history, previous church history, was Gnosticism. And when we think about the earlier church, Christians struggled to explain how they were different in organization from Gnostics. That's one of the reasons when Saint Irenaeus of Lyon started to come up with the idea of apostolic succession, laying hands, sort of how you can distinguish an Orthodox Christian from a Gnostic. And from this in mind, Arius' idea of what's this word, of there are various connectors between God and humans, and Christ was just a connector, right? So it's part of this Gnosticism, this Gnostic philosophy that found its way in Christianity. So, but the Lord Himself in the Scripture, He asked apostles, and I guys translated from Slavonic, so there is proper English phrase that that to whom people consider me, right? Was His question. And all heresies about this, all heresies, if you think about Arius was a cool man, a rapper. He looked after 700 virgins in Alexandria. People would follow him. He was charismatic. On the same hand, if you think about his opponent, Saint Athanasius the Great, he probably wasn't that cool of a person. There was reports that he used violence and so on, but it didn't matter. A cool guy turned out to be wrong, and maybe a dual person came out as a universal teacher. Okay, I'm not sure if I was going toward your question, Ivan.
No,
Okay.
it's I was
Okay, so let's get back to the empire, right? Uh, so you see, uh, Diocletian, he ruled from Nicomedia. Constantine was ruled from Constantinople. An ongoing issue was with uh, to what extent to what extent the system could afford outsiders. When the system is strong, right, they can dissolve those outsiders and convert them into the Romans with the time. When the system is weak, the number of barbarians can't just overpower. That's what happened in the 5th century in the West, right? One of the things that Constantine theoretically can be held accountable for, that basically moving away from the West, he left the West on its own devices. And that's on a long stretch can also give you idea about the rise of papacy, because the Bishop of Rome became father for Christians. He was the one who had to deal one-on-one with the barbarians because no strong imperial presence was available to him. So the empire was interesting in taxpayers, in having people who always was a pressing issue, to have people who were able to come up with steady payments on time. Fathers of towns were at some point appointed to be in charge, curials they were called, and they had to make up the difference. So there was particular amount of money that they have to deliver, and if this amount of money would not be available, they would have to make up difference. Okay. Uh, After the Edict of Milan, paganism was remained during Constantine's time a tolerated religion. It's not that it happened over the night. Constantine continued to support rebuilding of churches of the pagan cult, but he gave similar rights to Christianity. That's what was it about. Okay. So, and the traces of this event are seen in our church practice, because when we hear the Troparion for Christ's Nativity, Constantine's previous religion, right, previous cult, is mentioned. Okay, is mentioned here.
Ocha,
Yes.
in your video that you put on Populi, you
Mhm.
said the same thing. You were talking about the Troparion.
Yeah.
And the Troparion, well, we saw the people singing, but there was no audio.
Oh, you see, that's how bad it is. Sorry about this.
So yeah, I was a little confused, but yeah.
Yeah. You should be confused. Yes, that's wrong. That's wrong. So, but now we will have a chance. You see, I have some virus with Safari that trying to take over my computer. I will do another screen, share with you. It's here. Okay, so
So, I'm sorry. So, what exactly?
yes, Evgra, what were you saying?
So what exactly in there were you talking about? Like, what in the Troparion? Like, what
Right.
words?
Yeah, Constantine is called the son of the truth. I mean, I'm sorry, Christ is called the son of the truth, right?
Uh-huh.
And sort of the allusion of this connected with the Constantine's previous cult, cult of the sun. Okay.
Father, I have a quick question.
Yes.
Since you're a Byzantine history professor, do you prefer Byzantine chant or do you prefer Russian chant?
Ooh. I guess Russian. Yes.
Okay,
I guess.
fair enough.
Yes. I guess I prefer Russian. Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Right. I mean, just natural thing, you know. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Okay. So, kind of, you see that Tetrarchy thing debased, right? Debased, sort of undermined Roman status, right? As the imperial city. Another city that was competing very heavily and naturally was the city of King Alexandria. And the first pope was not in Rome, but in Alexandria, because, as you know, Archbishop of Alexandria is still called as a 13th apostle. He's like big full-blown titles of the 13th apostle and the pope. But it's not that he did it, he took it before Pope of Rome. I'm sorry, it was before the time of when Bishop of Rome started also to be called a pope. Okay. So the Edict of Milan, that's one of the copies that were sent elsewhere, and that we are going to look at it. Okay. So please read it. Please read this text on the screen. It's always good to get to be connected with primary sources. So I think it gives right feel about the study.
Which didn't you say that we don't have the copy of the Edict of Milan?
We don't have. We do. Well, what I meant to say is that we only have copies. We don't have like the sort of like the Declaration of Independence thing. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the Edict of Milan framed, and so this is the Edict of Milan. All we have copies that were done for various parts of the empire. Okay, that's what I was saying. Yeah. This is legalese. This is done as now as back then. It's done sort of like in lawyer's language. Yes, Artyom?
Is the source text, is it written in stone, or is it copied from on parchment or something?
Right. Let's see. Let's see. Where is this? Okay. They again. I don't think. I don't know this. I should say it. I don't know exactly where is this original copy is. My understanding that it's part of. It's found in some manuscripts. Right. It's not really that. Again, it's not really a copy that will have signatures. I don't think such a copy is available, but I will try to look it up to get an answer for myself for this, Artyom. Yes, Evgraph. Okay. So keep reading, keep reading. Right. What is really important and different, maybe not that different, because still we still have, I mean, in this country there is still strong mention of God and so on. But it says here, let this be done so that as we have said above, divine favor towards us, which under the most important circumstances we have already experienced, may for all the time preserve and prosper our success together with the good of the state. And that's something that was relevant for the Romans, for the Byzantines. And this is one of the key readings to the iconoclasm, because people started to ask a question: why is God not pleased with us anymore? What do we do wrong? Why God is unhappy? Why there is no wind in our sails? Why we are losing? Why we are shrinking? And sort of one of the answers that the iconoclast emperors came up with: because we are worshiping idols. We made idols out of icons. But sort of this mindset was topical, right? To find out what's going on. Why do Romans lose to the barbarians, to the outsiders, whoever were they at their time? Okay, so Sunday was a holiday as a result to honor resurrection. Uh, and as I mentioned, Constantine, he remained protector of the religion. He only baptized on his death bed. And also Christianity, what I like about this, the Christianity started to change morals, right? A sort of infanticide, killing of infants, various things, rights of women, right? They were defended on one hand. On the other hand, there also was a dose of fanaticism, in the sense that since Christianity is the full truth, why do we need paganism? Why do we need pagan culture? Why do we need anything associated with this? Okay, so, and you can see how later on in Alexandria there was library burned down and things like that. So Constantine was an emperor, a soldier type emperor. He was set up as a Caesar of the West by his army. He spent probably most of his lifetime with his soldiers. And he was as brutal as other soldiers, emperors were. Like, he took care of his own son Crispus when his wife Fausta accused him that actually Crispus had proposals, had some advances toward her, and he found out that it wasn't true, and he ordered that Fausta would be best to death, right? So there was sort of level of steam that she could not bear anymore, and she passed away. It's your break time. Okay, let's resume at 10 o'clock sharply. Okay, thank you. Right. So everybody is back. Just let me do screen share. Right. This is our guide, Reverend Mark Madrigal, who is right now in this video in a museum in Istanbul talking about origins of Byzantium. This video, I think, in popularly.
In the section of the museum that displays the remains of the ancient city of Byzantium. Byzantium was the city known, founded by the king Byzas prior to the founding of Constantinople, Constantine. So there's a legend about the founding of the city of Byzantium. It goes like this. There was a king from the kingdom of Megara. Megara is an ancient city-state that was located between Corinth and Corinth and Athens. And one day the king, he received a vision that he would be the founder of a great city. He went to the oracle, and the oracle told him to get on his ships, that he would find this city on the opposite shore of the city of the blind. He was kind of puzzled, but he got on his ships and he started sailing north, eventually coming to the mouth of the Bosphorus. And when he came to the mouth of the Bosphorus, he looked on both sides. He looked on the left and saw what is today the ancient site of Constantinople, the peninsula, 3 ways covered in water, hilly terrain. Then he looked at the right to the ancient fishing town of Chalcedon, and then he reasoned and he said, boy, these people on the right must be blind to not have seen this perfect spot on the left. And so it is that he built his city on the opposite shore of the city of the blind, and of course he named it after himself, Byzantium, because the name of the king was Byzas. So what we see in this floor of the museum is a lot of these remains from the Hellenistic period, pre-Constantine.
Right. So we just mentioned about sort of we just listened to this story again. This is just it's kind of mythological, but that's the best we can get about the foundation of Byzantium, which was known for ages because of the location, since this ability to control the straits was precious.
Wojciech, in your presentation earlier, you said something about Constantine also building Roman temples in Byzantium, pagan temples in Byzantium, da?
Yes, rebuilding like he helped contributed towards the one in Babylon, right? Yes, keep going.
In your lecture I was watching yesterday, you said that in the city of Constantinople he did not allow any pagan temples to be built.
Right.
Why did he build them but not allow them in his city?
Right, because it was the new capital from the scratch, and one of the things that I suggest you, because you are getting to keep yourself with various knowledge, right? You are studying the Russian history, will be studying the Russian history. Compare Constantine the Great with Peter the Great. The boss visionaries, the boss reformers needed the fresh start. So Constantine the Great, he invited some number of people from Rome who resettled, who settled in his new town of Constantinople. But he was building new capital that would reflect his vision and he didn't want to have any resistance from old money family, from hereditary noblemen who were forever in Rome and so on. And that's part of this.
So was the not building the pagan temples was a sort of move to accumulate power so that he could like circumvent powerful people in Rome, or
No, I just meant that it's his new capital, Christian capital. It's reflected his identity, reflected the fact that the city was consecrated as a holy city, right? And that's one of the things that became very important for the Byzantines. That for them essentially Constantinople became the city. And when you hear in Traparia and whatever, Grad tvoj sahrani, preserve your city, that would be almost, or not, it's always probably, if it's like text that related to the Byzantine times, would refer to Constantinople, because
well, in the original Ocha, it did say it did mention the emperor. It said emperor, not city.
yeah, but there are references. I mean, in various liturgical poetry. That's what I'm saying. In Traparia, in services, you would come across the mention about your city, not emperor, and that city is Constantinople,
Okay.
the Queen City. Okay. Even if you think about modern day Istanbul, right? Istanbul, you one of the interpretation of this name would be is teen po lean, right? Eastern Pauline, towards the city, right? Towards the city. Okay. So that would be one of the possible readings. So it kind of like people say who live in upstate, I go to the city, they would mean New York. And Istanbul was I'm sorry, Constantinople was the city of that time. Okay, so consequences of Constantine's victory were that in 312 the Praetorian Guard was abandoned. Okay, because they sided with Maxentius, and the Praetorians were substituted with special new elite cavalry regiment, and of course it took outsiders. Why? Because training time in Byzantine army was maybe twice longer than an American army nowadays. So to train a killing machine would take a lot of time, a lot of money, and also you cannot clone them. If you lost a professional warrior, you would not have a couple of them in store to replace him. That's why Byzantines, they choose their battles very carefully. Because if you, and all those defeats, like the one that Julian suffered from the Persians, when he, inspired by his classical ideas of a Roman leader leading his cavalry, he ran ahead of everybody else and he was shot, which was reckless of him to do. So sort of things like that, they're not supposed to happen, because when there is a defeat of the army, it will take long time to train new recruits and to get them up to the to the top-notch level, up to the game. So
Ocha, you know that we're still looking at your Finder window, right?
no, I don't. I
Yeah,
don't.
we're still looking at the folder.
Thanks, Evgraf, for mentioning. Yeah, thanks for mentioning. Please don't hesitate to mention anything if you don't understand anything, because of I mixed words and accent or whatever. Let me know. Send me chat or whatever. So you see that what I was saying, what I was writing, this Eastern Pauline, okay, that's one of the possible rendition of modern day Istanbul towards the city. Okay, right,
May I ask a question?
right. Yes.
Why did he? It says that Constantine had a fondness of the German troops. What did he like about them?
Who?
It says right here, Constantine's fondness for German troops led to the charge that he had barbarized the army. Like, what do you mean by that? Did he like implement their strategies or something into his own like ranks, or like how did that work?
Right. You see. This is a quote, right? So, but it's a common fact that Germanic peoples, they were good fighters, but they didn't have skills, they didn't have techniques that Roman had. So it was very attractive to use those people who were naturally aggressive warriors by their character, by their personality, sort of, and it keeps them with Roman fighting techniques. It kind of was very, very attractive to turn them into war machines, right? But again, that I don't know what he meant by fondness. So okay, so like that he had a soft spot for them. I don't know, right? Again, I was talking about this already, that every game has also a disadvantage. Like we will be talking about Justinian. Justinian, he did marvelously. He did very, how to say, impressive on regaining the territories, but he overstretched the empire. Okay, so that's probably inevitable. That's all, every good deed also would have some kind of disadvantage, unfortunately. And so Constantine, he set up this new city of new capital, and a huge thing regarding his new setup, this new setup, that this eastern part of the Roman Empire survived barbarians. Think about like what the western part of the empire experienced happened to the eastern part of the empire 1000 years later when the Ottomans took over the east. So now barbarians already done this to the western part of the empire. They took care of this. But because of the Danube river border, and because so the eastern part of the empire survived Goths, and Goths were suppressed by Hans, Chinese people, right? I'm sorry, people, nomad people, nomad type of people, nomads who came from China's area. Okay. Now, another thing that is connected with Constantine is that connected with the church, that connected what we touch upon, right? With Diocletian and Constantine, we are seeing a very strong development of the cult of the emperor. Not of the cult of the emperor as a deity, as a somebody who has to be worshipped. That was part of the previous time, but we are seeing that the previous city-state kind of liberties that were associated with the emperor, as basically it's like American presidents. That's what I want to say. The emperor before the crisis of the 3rd century was the first among equals. If you look at the portraits, if the sculptures of this time of the early 3rd century, they are just depicted very realistically as every human would be. Now you are seeing sort of that emperor look differently. Okay, and this was an ongoing development that unified, that power became unified in emperor's hands. So I was mentioning about parallels between Peter the Great and Emperor Constantine the Great. They didn't have time for resistance. They didn't have time to deal with old aristocratic families. So Constantine, he set up his senate, right, in Constantinople. But those senators, they were handpicked. And later on, I'm not sure if Constantine started to pay them salary or not, but they were on a payroll from the empire, from the emperor. So it was quite a different animal than it was in Rome, and such a senate existed throughout the Byzantine history until the very end as a consulting body for the emperor. Therefore, it didn't really have this strong representative component than it used to be in the Republic, right? And it used to be before Octavian Augustus time. So that's something that this development is part of this process, that figure of emperor becoming much more dominant, right? And it's even here, right? Sort of dominus, master of household, okay, it's sister of dominate, it says here, okay. This is succession, part of the succession table that is in your populi, just reproduce here. So it might be useful if you guys, if you haven't done this, if you spend little more time hanging around populi, seeing what is there and so on, using those things for your advantage. I mentioned to you that one of the things, one of the way to skin the cat is to measure your studies of history through various parameters. One of the parameters is to identify major figures and remember them. There are not that many of them. Another way is to identify and remember external enemies, right? And major battles. There are like three criteria, that three basically criteria on your checklist. So gods, right? They were Aryans, and
They were Christians, like Arian Christians.
yes, indeed, Aryan Christians. And when you think about St. John Chrysostom, he was the one who was concerned about influence of gods and fact that they were allowed to have their own church outside of Constantinople, right? So gods were Aryans, and then Sasanian Empire, Persian Empire, they were still Zoroastrian at this time, right? Because I mean it was before the rise of Islam.
Ocha, what does that mean? Julian was the only scion of Constantine? Because Constantine had other sons, right? So what does that mean that he was the only? I don't know how to pronounce
he
that.
didn't
But...
survived because other son, I mean Crispus was killed, right? So no one survived at the time of Julian, and Julian was his nephew. So
But Constantine had like 4 sons, didn't he? Like
right,
Constantinus, Constantine II.
right,
There were a couple others, though.
right. But I mean, you see, there was Constantius II. He was childless, right? So they, at the time of Julian, no one else of his sons survived. Okay, so Julian was a reader. He studied in Athens together with the great ecumenical teachers Saint Basil and Saint Basil and his brother Gregory, the theologian. And having studied, he was quiet during his studies, but through his studies he developed love for philosophy, and he developed sort of dealing with seeing Christianity as it was, basically made him to reconvert or whatever, to convert and become born again Hellenist or pagan. And as with often with converts, he idealized paganist religion. So people who remain pagans, like a pagan priest, they would laugh at him. They would laugh because he was more pagan. So I cannot say more Pope of Rome than the Pope, but he was more pagan than a sort of people who never were Christians, because people were lukewarm already at this time. Sort of a paganism was naturally declining, and that's perhaps actually an answer to Constantine's choice, because he revitalized the empire by choosing Christianity. That became a dynamic, that became attractive, that became a real deal. Just think about Antony the Great, 4th century person who withdrew himself from Alexandria, going to the desert and becoming the father of the Orthodox monasticism. People consider Christianity a real deal, something that it was how to say, it was energetic, right? It was appealing, but nothing like that can be said about paganism. It was just traditional phase. Many people disagree on philosophical grounds, educated people with Christianity, but this was more philosophical debate. But for regular folks, it was just, custom of the land, tradition of the land. So Julian tried to change it using also elements from the Christian church. He wanted to organize pagan cult in a sense as it was in the Christian church. He himself was involved in sacrifices, like in Alexandria there was a big feast and he showed up with a goose, right? And rain happened and he was still zealous about sacrificing this goose. Everybody else left, and so he remained almost like alone. So people laughed at him. It's kind of was an attempt to change clock back, right? And then, as I mentioned, he died in Persia. He heroically jumped ahead of his troops. And then in Christians believe that holy martyr Artemius himself appeared and pierced him with a spear. Okay, that's what was believed. So the clock didn't go back. His successor, pushed ahead by the army, Jovian, subscribed to traditional Nicene Orthodoxy, the ones that we confess. And the West was under his brother Valens. Valentinian ruled West, right? And he was an Arian. Now, it's important battle, along one of those that I mentioned to you, and this is the Battle of Adrianople, right? And it's important in the same way as the Battle of Yarmouk of 636 is important, because the Romans, they suddenly lost to new kids on the block, people who were fresh out of desert and whom no one took seriously because they consider them just raiders, thieves, brigands. So, and this was the army of Islam, following by the first generation of Muhammad's disciples. Then
Wait,
the next Then the next battle is 1074, the Battle of Manzikert, when the Romans lost to Seljuk. So this is of similar importance, right? The Battle of Adrianople. Yes, Yevgraf, what is it?
So Muslims, that was hundreds of years later, though.
Indeed, but I
Oh.
am saying that this battle is very significant for the Byzantine history.
Oh,
On the same on par with those two that I mentioned.
just because they were defeated by the Visigoths?
Right, yes, because it's signaled that barbarians now are going to take over. That's the whole meaning at looking of those battles, not just for the sake of information, but we mark the history. We look at them as markers, as indicators of the processes. That's the only sense to look at them. Otherwise, it's just piece of information. So you see that Theodosius the Great is in bold. And whenever you see that somebody's name is in bold, it means this is a stone rock figure. And it means you need to know him, you need to meet him. Right? Theodosius the Great, again, elected by the army. So army was an important conservative factor in Byzantine history that helped the Byzantines to survive. So this partition of the empire continue, east and west. It's proved to be impossible to just reign the whole empire, okay? But at the same time, East was more wealthy and East was in better shape to digest, to absorb barbarians. Despite the fact that Goths resettled throughout the empire, they were not in position to take it over. This was an ongoing issue for the Byzantine Empire. If you think about the 14th century, right, sort of, some people say that it was like prolonging agony, which is kind of debatable because agony cannot last for 2 centuries. So it was they need to look for some other words. But in the 14th century, there were Catalan mercenaries who were unstoppably robbing, terrorizing people in the empire, and the empire didn't even have enough police force to restrain them. So
Father, I have a question.
just let me wrap it up. So
Okay.
let me finish my thought. And in the 5th century, the empire was in the better shape and to deal with Goths. Yes, what is your question?
My question was, so I know obviously the West had a big barbarian problem, but I'm wondering if other than the Goths that settled in Crimea for Byzantium, did they really have any other barbarian issues per se, or was it basically just those Goths kind of?
What do you mean barbarian issues?
Because I know that the West obviously had like big barbarian issues, which led to the downfall, like like the Huns, Visigoths, Celts, Vandals, etc. But the only thing I really remember just personally reading with regards to the Byzantines was just like the Crimean Goths, I guess, like the Goths were settled in Crimea. But I was there like what else did they, I guess, struggle with like barbarian wise? Like was it ever, I guess? I mean, I know you said that they were able to absorb it better, but was there anything, I guess, even remotely threatening barbarian-wise for the Byzantine, like for the eastern part of the empire.
Right. I mean, they again, right. Barbarian is a misleading chauvinistic term that was used by the Byzantines, but of course, back then they didn't think in modern categories like that.
Yeah.
So barbarian means somebody who doesn't speak English, basically, right? Sort of somebody who doesn't speak lingua franca, doesn't speak Latin, and therefore whatever he says, it's bar. So whatever, just blah blah blah. It would be like blah blah blahlians or whatever, sort of, right? And at this time, they were not barbarians in the sense that we use it like barbarian, a guy who would, I don't know, eat with his hands and sort of, no manners or whatever, right? That was how we use barbarian, right? So a very brute type of a seminarian, right? Basically. So, but like, I mean, yeah, something like that, never washed himself and so on. But I mean, those gods who settled in Crimea, they were Arian Christians. And they were that's something that interesting. They were very, how to say, they were very fanatical Arian Christians. Figure it out. I don't know. I didn't get to the bottom of this, but they were very fanatical about that. So they were part of the empire. They were not barbarians who just want to grab and steal and do, and just have a temporary advantage of situations. They belong there. They could speak cultural language of the empire, but they were not Orthodox Christians. I would say if they would have been converted to Orthodox Christianity, they would be just one of them.
Okay, thank you, Father.
Right. Who was speaking actually? I couldn't figure out. Who was it?
Me, Paul.
Oh, you speak from the distance. I see how it works. Wow, man. I see it. Powerful voice. Holy moly. Wow.
Thank you, Father.
Okay, I understand. It's almost like was voice somewhere coming down. Right. So the empire was divided. And you see how it was divided, right? The partition of the empire, right? East and west.
Father, the barbarian threat, from my understanding, it mostly comes from the north, duh? Like, mostly it comes from that area that,
I think it's fair. It's fair, yeah. Germanic people, yeah, from the north. Because I mean, barbarians, it's a Roman term for Germanic people. I mean,
only Germanic?
I would say that's initially it was applied to Germanic, right? One of the things that wasn't mentioned, and I look right now at this map, and you see this. Unfortunately, I have this. I have this thing coming across right from the player, and you see North Africa, right? It's part of the Latin speaking world, right? And they dealt with all people who were from Nubia, from modern days, would be modern day, the country of Chad, would be not modern day Sudan, sort of like Upper Africa. So, but I don't think they were called barbarians. Okay. But another confusing thing, that in order to be a culture considered an educated man, you would have to show off. Like Byzantines, they were notoriously known as snobbish people. I mean, educated Byzantines. And when you write whatever you write, like your history, you would show off showing your classical education. Therefore, they applied the term Scythians for some people who lived on the border with Crimea in sort of modern day Don River basin. But we don't know exactly who they were because they use some old terms and apply them to their contemporaries just for the sake of demonstrating their education, because those were classical terms. It's always good habit to reuse, to reapply classical terminology in their time. Okay, so Gratian proclaimed Theodosius the First emperor, right? This is time, the end of the 4th century is a time of revolts in the empire. Okay. Empire is divided into two halves whenever you write your test. So do mention this. Is important to remember about this, and when you do your studies, remember this division, because later in the 4th century there was, let's see, what was his name, Romulus he was. Anyway, there was a last baby emperor, and at his time a crown was sent to Constantinople. Okay. Another thing that was exported by Constantine from Rome was circus parties that became much more important at the time of Justinian's reign, that there was even a revolt. So circus parties, and this is your textbook, right? And you see there is hippodrome. An hippodrome was a place, a forum, where an emperor would speak to the people of Constantinople. In the same way as in Rome, there were a lot of freeloaders, literal sense, freeloaders, because they would receive free loaves of bread daily. So Constantine even recreated a city crowd as it was in Rome. So there were those people who would have, like, I mean, a passport, right? But they didn't have any money. So they were free people, but they just sort of live on how it's called, of panhandling, and also they wanted to have entertainment. So, and emperor would speak to them, and you see when Justinian spoke to the crowd in Hippodrome, the crowd has started to shout at him, started to interrupt him. That's also another very Roman thing. Okay, guys, your time is up. I respect this, and we will continue, God willing, tomorrow. Okay, thanks for the class, everyone.
Thank you.
Спасибо большое.
Yep.
Thank you, Father.
Достойно я всякого истину, блажите тебя, Богородицу, пресноблаженную и пренепорочную, и Матерь Бога нашего, честнейшую Херувим, и славнейшую без сравнения Серафим, без истления Бога Слова родшую, сущую Богородицу тебя величаем.
Butcher, can I ask you a really quick?
Yes.
It's not really a question so much as just telling you something. I decided to go with the topic we discussed, so I'm going to. I did order the book by Leslie Nenor, something like that.
Leonora Neal.
Yeah, Nora. So I ordered that book, and it says it's supposed to be here Friday, which is sooner than I was expecting it. The Alexiad, I'm just going to print online, because I like just print it here.
Are you sure that we don't have it in the